Hi, this is Munson with Munson Music. I'm going to talk about how you can play a song called Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy. And we're going to start with kind of our intro, which kind of becomes our chorus progression. We start on a D major chord. When we play D major, first finger goes to the G string on the 2nd fret, second finger on the high E 2nd fret, and third finger on the B string 3rd fret. And if you strum the D string to the high E string, that sounds a D major chord, and it sounds really, really happy. Now, while you're on Ds in general, it can be kind of cool to kind of lift off the 2nd finger and make that a D suspended 2nd. Or you could take the pinky and add it in on the high E 3rd fret and make it a D sus and kind of say some stuff around D chords. Or you could use a D5 power chord. When we play D5, first finger goes to the A string on the 5th fret, third finger on the D string on the 7th fret. We'll talk about some drop D options for this too. But if you play just the A string and the D string on that, that sounds like a D5 power chord. And then from the D, we'd be going to a G major chord. When we play G major, first finger goes to the A on the 2nd fret, second finger on the low E string on the 3rd fret, and third finger on the high E string on the 3rd fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds a G major chord, and it sounds really, really happy. Now you may also want to take the 3rd finger and kind of go to the B string 3rd fret, pinky on the high E string 3rd fret, and that could be another cool way to work the G. Or if you want to kind of dig on the power chord sound, you could do first finger on the low E 3rd, third finger on the A string 5th, and kind of work just the E and the A strings for a G5 power chord. And then from the G, we'll be going to a B minor chord. When we play B minor, normally you do this as a 2nd fret bar, second finger on the B string 3rd fret, third finger on the D string on the 4th fret, and the pinky on the G string 4th fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds a B minor chord, and it sounds really sad. Now you may also want to think about lifting off the pinky, kind of making that a B minor 7 chord. Or another way you could play B minor 7 would be doing first finger on the A 2nd, second finger on the G string 2nd, third finger on the high E 2nd. If you strum the A string to the high E string, it's another way you could play B minor 7. Or you may dig on kind of doing first finger on the A 2nd, second finger on the G string 2nd, third finger on the B string 3rd, and the pinky on the high E string 3rd, kind of using that for your B minor chord. Or you could use a B5 power chord, where you could do first finger on the A string on the 2nd fret, third finger on the D string 4th fret, for kind of that B5 power chord. And then from the B, we go back to our G. So you could kind of dig on this as just kind of a down with downs with muting, kind of 8 downs on each chord between that D, G, and the B minor, the B5, G. Or a lot of times I like to use something called a strum pattern. And one of my favorite strum patterns for a 4/4 like this is down, down, up, up, down, up. So if we tried it that way, you'd have the D, down, up, down, D, down, up, down, G, down, up, down, G, down, up, down, B minor, G, G. Or you can even kind of take those two ideas and then kind of alternate between them too. Kind of a cool idea for the song. So you want to kind of experiment and find a way that works for you and kind of run with it. B minor, G, G. And then from kind of our intro, then we end up going into our first verse. We start out on D, and the G, and the B minor, and the G, and we end up doing that twice, and that kind of feels like things are quicker. And then we go to a D major chord, but then we go to an E minor chord when we play E minor. First finger goes to the A on the 2nd fret, the second finger on the D string 2nd fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds an E minor chord, and it sounds really sad. Now you may also want to think about adding in the third finger on the B string 3rd fret, pinky on the high E string 3rd fret, kind of working the E minor 7 that way. Or you could use an E5 power chord, where you use the low E string and the A string of that. Or you could put the first finger on the 7th on the A, and then the third finger on the D on the 9, and kind of make a big E5 power chord that way. And then from the E, then we go back to our B minor, and then our G, and then we go back to the D, to the E minor, to the B minor, and then our G major. So you could kind of follow that with the power chords, kind of D, G, or you can do the down, down, up, down, up, and kind of work the bigger chords. Working your way D, G, B minor, G, D, B minor, B minor, G, B, E minor, B minor, G, pre-chorus part. And our pre-chorus starts on the F sharp minor chord. Normally you do this as a 2nd fret bar, 3rd finger on the A string on the 4th fret, pinky on the D string on the 4th fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds an F sharp minor chord that sounds really sad. Now you may also want to dig on kind of lifting off the pinky and making it an F sharp minor 7, or you can make it an F sharp 5 power chord by doing 1st finger low E 2nd, and then 3rd finger on the A string 4th fret, kind of working that for the F sharp minor, the F sharp 5. And then from the F sharp we go to a G, and then we go to an A major chord. When we play A major, 1st finger goes to the D on the 2nd fret, the 2nd finger on the G string on the 2nd fret, and 3rd finger on the B string on the 3rd fret. And if you strum all those together, that sounds an A major chord and it sounds really, really happy. Now you may also want to dig on kind of doing this as an A7 sus, where you do 1st finger on the D 2nd, 2nd finger on the G 2nd, 3rd finger on the B string 3rd, and the pinky on the high E string 3rd. And if you strum the A string to the high E string, that sounds an A7 sus, so that might be kind of a cool change. And then from the A we go to a B minor, but then we go to a C major chord when we play C major. 1st finger, or you could do an A5 power chord for the A, where you do the A string and the D string together on that change. Or you could go low E string on the 5th fret, 3rd finger on the A string on the 7th fret for that, kind of work that as an A5 power chord. And then we go to that B minor, and then we work it up into a C major when we play C major. 1st finger goes to the B on the 1st fret, 2nd finger on the D string 2nd fret, 3rd finger on the A string on the 3rd fret. And if you strum the A string to the high E string, that sounds a C major chord and it sounds really happy. Now a lot of times on C's you can kind of lift off the 1st finger and make it a C major 7, or you can take the pinky and add it in on the B string 3rd and make it a C major 9, or another way to play C major 9. And you can do 1st finger on the D 2nd, 2nd finger on the A string 3rd, 3rd finger on the B string 3rd, and the pinky on the high E string 3rd, kind of work that as a C major 9. Or you can kind of work that as a C5 power chord, where you do 1st finger on the A 3rd, 3rd finger on the D string 5th, kind of work it that way. And then from the C we go back to our B, and then we kind of end up on our G major through that pre-chorus. So the whole pre-chorus kind of working the power chords. You have the F sharp, G, A, B, C, B, G, G. Or if you're working the strum pattern, then you'd have the F sharp minor, G, A, B minor, C, B minor, G, G. And then from there, we'll be going back into our chorus part. And one other thing I think about adding to the song is bass notes. And a lot of times on that first down, of the down, down, up, down, up, you could throw in a bass for the chord. So on the D, you'd have the D for the bass. On the G, you'd have low E for the bass. On the B minor, you'd have the A for the bass. On the F sharp minor, you'd have low E for the bass. We're kind of doing that full bar. On the G, you'd have low E for the bass. On the A, you'd have the A for the bass. And then on the C, we'd have the A for the bass. So we tried that next chorus with kind of a bass down, up, down, up. We have D, 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 bass, D, G, low E, bass, B minor, G, A, pre-chorus part is kind of a chorus tag, so we have our F sharp minor, G, A, B minor, C, B minor, and our G, Now one other thing I think about doing with this song though is working this as kind of a drop D tuning idea. And what I mean by that is if you take the low E string and if you kind of loosen them up just a little bit to try and match the D note or the D string, so now it sounds like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, somewhere between the D and the D, or you could grab two. That's always good. You know, kind of get your E string to now be a D note. And that can support your D note. What it does is it shifts things over. So power chord wise, this can be very cool. Your D5 power chord would just be the open, so you can even throw the D chord in. And then kind of take your first finger and go over just the E and the A and the D string on the 5th fret, and that kind of becomes your G. And then your B note would kind of end up on the 9th fret on the low E, and I'm kind of thinking low E even though it's a D now. So you kind of be alternating on that chorus part between the open to the 5th, and then to the 9th, and then back to 5th fret. So that might be kind of a cool thing to kind of work, either with the strum pattern, or you can even kind of work that as kind of the down idea. So that might be kind of a cool way to kind of work that the chorus part. So you have the D, G, B, G. And the weird part is when you get to that E minor, instead of it being opens, now it's going to end up being 2nd fret for the E minor. So through that whole verse is a drop D idea. You'd have kind of a D open, 5, 9, 5 for the G, open for the D, 5 for the G, 9 for the B, 5 for the G, and then D, and then 2nd fret for the E minor, 9 for the B, 5, open for D, 2nd fret for the E, 9 for the B, and then 5 for the G. And then when we get to our pre-chorus idea, now you'd end up kind of doing 4th fret for the F sharp minor, 5th for the G, 7 for the A, 9th fret for the B, and then 10th fret for the C, back to 9 for the B, and then we kind of end with that 5th fret for the G at the very end. So we're kind of digging on kind of that one finger power chord idea. You have F sharp, G, A, B, 10 for C, 9 for B, 5 for G. And then from there, then we'll be going back into our chorus part. So we're about to kind of our D, G, 9 for B, 5 for G. Our bridge part, and our bridge starts with this cool little hit where you do the E minor 3 times, or 4 times if you wanted to, but and then we go open D, and then we kind of do a G, and you could do that as kind of that drop D power chord idea, or if you kind of take your G major chord that we were doing earlier and added 2 frets to the low E string, that becomes your drop D G chord. So then you'd have first finger on the high E on the 3rd fret. I'm cheating this a little bit. 3rd fret on the low E string on the 5th fret. I'm kind of muting out the A string for a G chord. So you may want to kind of play around with that voicing for the G through that bridge. So you'd have the E minor, D, and then we're waiting. And then you got a big G, and we're waiting. And then we go back to a D, and then we go back to a G, and then we kind of end up with kind of a G with a down up kill it kind of idea. Kind of at the very end of that. And then from there, then we'll be going back into our chorus part. So we got our D, G, Feel free to mix this up any way you want to. And we do kind of a big G hit at the very end before we go into our outro. And our outro kind of starts like the bridge. You got that E with the down, down, and then big D. And then you hear this cool little lick come in where you can play 2nd fret on the high E 3 times, open E 3 times, 3rd fret on the high E 3 times, and then open E 3 times, and then we do a hammer on the 2nd fret on the high E string. So we're going 2, 2, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3, 3, 3, 0, 0, 0, 0, 2. Cool way to end it. Even around the D chord, that can be kind of a cool idea. But that's the basics of how you could strum through Sugar We're Going Down with kind of a standard tuning option and a drop D option. So good luck!